Hello everyone, it's Shane Conto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we're continuing the very, very early on films of John Ford. We're still in the 19 teens, and back again, who's going to be a frequent collaborator through this whole process, is my wife, Jess. Jess, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
She's a real ride or die. Doing all the John Ford movies.
Shane put this in his vows, so I had to. He said, I'll only marry you if you watch early cinema John Ford films with me, otherwise the deal is off.
I did not put any of that in my vows, but...
I don't remember what you said because I was too busy sobbing incoherently.
Well, hopefully don't do that during this particular episode. I don't know if this movie really invoked that kind of emotion, but we are talking about The Craving, which is a co-directed, or is it, film by John and Francis Ford. But we'll get to that. But if you haven't tuned into Welcome to the Wasteland before, there's 3 segments, and we start with coming attractions, get to our feature of the week, and have some recommendations for you. This is releasing on June 30th, wrapping up halfway through 2023 already, and I don't like it. But what we both hope to be liking is a particular film. It's a little sequel you might have heard of, starring an 80-year-old man called Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And Jess, why are you excited?
I'm hoping that it erases the memory I have of the first, unfortunately, Indiana Jones movie that I ever saw, and the only one I've ever seen in theaters, which was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I don't know, we'll see if that pans out.
Obviously I did talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for this show when I did Steven Spielberg, and I don't hate it, but it's like definitely a giant step down from the original trilogy of films. And this time James Mangold is taking the reins of Walk the Line, 3:10 to Yuma, Ford v Ferrari, and Logan fame. And
dad movies.
Yes. And Indiana Jones, dad movies.
Yeah, see, I didn't understand. I had never seen any of the other Indiana Jones movies, so when I saw Crystal Skull, I was like, why do people love this franchise? I had no idea. Well, and this was way back in the day before Rotten Tomatoes was really like a big thing.
Well, and Raiders is like the perfect adventure film.
I didn't watch it till I was in my 20s.
Well, it was worth the wait.
Yeah,
it's tight. And am I the biggest fan of them incorporating time travel into this movie? Whatever. But, you know, I think Harrison Ford, especially based off of his work recently, is going to give it his all. It is pretty exciting seeing John Rhys Davies back. Phoebe Waller-Bridge being involved adds some interesting layers, and having the likes of Mads Mikkelsen and Antonio Banderas joining the cast too. Pretty interesting. But this is apparently the longest, by far, Indiana Jones film, and it'll be interesting to how it all plays out. But I'm glad this is the last one. And I love the response that Harrison Ford had when asked who should play Indiana Jones. I was like, no one. It's me. So, which I would give Lucasfilm so much credit if they're just like, let it die with Harrison Ford and just not touch it again. But they won't. But we can only hope. But we'll have to see how this film turns out. I am cautiously optimistic. I am a big fan of James Mangold. All those movies that I listed are great movies, so I'm pretty excited. Now, a film that is very interesting looking back at these really old, early John Ford films, but there wasn't a whole lot of detail that I found in terms of backstory for this film. Basically, that the only actually intact edition of this film is from the I Film Institute Nederland. So, yes, it's Dutch. And we watched it in Dutch. And it had no subtitles or anything on YouTube. So, luckily, we had Google Lens.
Google Lens, yeah.
And translated it for us, which we got through, like, the first 15 minutes without it.
You can generally get the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not too deep a plot. It just makes more sense with the translations.
And you keep seeing the same words over and over again, and then you realize that some of them are very insensitive words for Asian people.
Problematic.
But
just a touch of brown face.
This is starring Francis Ford, who, if you look at him, looks like he's definitely John Ford's brother. So I recognized him.
Cut glass.
Yeah, like right away.
That's coming from a family with prominent chins.
And now I didn't know about this until Jess brought this up while watching the movie, but apparently John Ford himself said he didn't direct this. Mm-hmm. And people reinforced that, but yet he still has co-director on this film.
I think Universal said that it lines up with the paperwork that he didn't direct it.
But the issue is, he still gets credit, so that's why I did it for this show, and it's interesting to think about because, like, it has, like, John Ford credited as Jack Ford. Mm-hmm. And
it's a nice masculine name.
Yeah, you have this film, which is an Indian scholar seeks an American colleague who is working on an powerful explosive, trying to get his formula by taking advantage of his drinking problem.
Oh, God.
So... Mm-hmm. Oh, now the only thing I could think of when in movies somebody says they have a drinking problem is from Burn After Reading, where it's just like, I have a drinking problem. You're a Mormon. Next to you, everyone has a drinking problem.
That was me at that wedding next to a Mormon while I had 6 or 7 cocktails.
But Jess, what were your general thoughts on The Craving?
I feel like it's very of its time. Like, wasn't that right before Prohibition went through?
I guess,
yeah. Wasn't that, like, the temperance movement? I have a lot of special interests. I think most people with ADHD have special interests in history.
Well, that was towards the end of the 20s, right?
Prohibition was repealed. But there was a big movement in the U.S. to move towards temperance.
Well, this is a wag your finger at don't drink.
Yeah, it does have a pretty strong message of that. I thought it was fine. I mean, they couldn't find an actual Indian actor to play him, but I know it's of its time. Doesn't excuse it because still don't do brown face, but
yeah, I think one of the biggest problematic aspects of this film is that, like, they could have easily just been, okay, the villain is an Indian person. But every time they reference him, and especially when he's doing something sneaky, bad, or just generally immoral, it's like the Eastlander, or the that, and
that
just
was
like
a translation from Dutch.
And I'm like, I feel like you reinforcing the fact that he's from this other place every time he does a bad thing is just in bad taste.
Part of the exoticism.
And it stands out, and it's very uncomfortable to look at in 2023.
He has a name, too. Like, they refer to him by both.
Very rarely do they actually reference him by his actual name.
This guy, you remember, he's from Asia.
And the only way that you really... And that's the thing, the only way you know that he's supposed to be Indian, because, it's just a white dude, is the fact that, like, they refer to him as an Eastlander or other terms that really aren't kosher in 2023.
Yeah, right.
But, like, that, and it's, yet again, handling of women, where, like, literally the only female character is stuck in this film who is a ward to this Indian scientist who's being leveraged by her, who leverages his ward to go trick Francis Ford, who's the star of the film, into drinking again. Yeah. So once he gets drunk, he could steal his Krabby Patty formula. So, like, this is basically a SpongeBob episode, which is really, really, really weird to think about.
He wants the formula.
He wants my Krabby Patty formula.
Yeah. And there were women in the hallucination scenes, too.
Well,
he was reminiscing about how shitty he used to be.
Well, I think the most interesting parts of this film is any time it's not just characters interacting with each other. Because, for one, you can definitely tell that this doesn't feel like early John Ford films compared to the other 3 that I've gone through so far. But there's flashbacks to, like, this invasion of how this young white girl became the ward of an Indian man. And it's a big invasion scene and stuff like that. And then they have a war scene later in the film. And I'm like, did John Ford direct those scenes?
The kind of thing. The ladies in the cocktail, the martini glass was pretty cool too.
Which that was really impressive because the earliest I could, like, picture that, like, the really heavy usage of miniature people in a frame with others in a long sustained sequence is The Bride of Frankenstein. And that's not for, like, almost 20 years after this. Yeah. So that's really impressive how they're able to make, like, these small women inside, like, a martini glass.
It's convincing.
Or, like, there's one sequence where one of them gets trapped under a glass, the other one smashes the glass.
With a tiny hammer.
Yeah, and
it shatters convincingly.
Well, yeah, so, like, though it feels like they put all the budget and all the effort into, like, those scenes. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, John Ford, if he did actually get involved in this, was directed certain scenes of it. Because, like, it wouldn't be unheard of, like, this might seem like a strange comparison, but the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, George Miller only directed 2 scenes. And it was the Thunderdome and the train chase at the end. Because he only did the action sequences. George Ogilvy directed the whole rest of the film.
Had to be another George.
Yep, and probably Australian.
Great name.
But this film has some impressive technical aspects. It has a different kind of plot than John Ford's other films, which are all westerns. So, like, this was an interesting, like, change of pace early on. But, like, in the end of it, it's... the villain is just fully representative by his race. The young woman has no agency at all, and Francis Ford's character has to come in and save her. And basically, the most interesting and only interesting performance in here is Francis Ford doing his, like, drunken man acting,
he
which
did pretty well.
Is that
during the hallucinations? Yeah,
and so, like, in the end, it has some things that are very memorable, but overall, as a whole, it's not great.
It's pretty dated.
It feels extremely dated, like very dated, for a film that came out 105 years ago. So, let that sink in. But Jess, do you have any other thoughts about The Craving?
Nope.
Well, let's get into our recommendations, and what would you like to recommend to everybody?
I'd recommend everybody rewatch Twister. It's not a pure comedy as I thought, but it was funnier than I thought based on Shane's reaction when I told him I thought it was a really funny movie. He was like, no, it's a disaster movie. I'm like, are you sure? Because I really remember it being very funny. It's both.
Well, that's the thing. It has memorable characters, and some of which are very funny. Like, Philip Seymour Hoffman's just, like, a delight every second he's on screen.
All the backup guys are pretty funny. Like, the whole team.
Yeah, you have Alan Ruck.
They're, like, random crap they pulled out of the junkyard and assembled.
Yeah, because you have, like, Jeffrey Davies, you have Alan Ruck. Alan Ruck, a.k.a. who at one point was only known as Cameron from Ferris Bueller, who's now only known as Connor from Succession. So, he was in there, and Cary Elwes is just such a dick.
Yeah,
he is
a bit of a bastard.
So hateable.
Well, and apparently in the storm chasing community, I'm into it, but I'm not, like, into it. I'm not going to go chasing, but
you did take classes.
No, those are the Skywarn classes. It's so that I can be a trained spotter and call things in the exotic state of New Jersey where we have many tornadoes. But, I mean, we have a couple, but...
But Jess isn't that into it.
I'm not bad... Here's the thing, the hobby storm chasers get super into it. I'm not about to get in my car and chase. I'm not about to put antennae or a hail guard or anything on the top. I'm just saying, there's drama in that as any hobby community. Just scroll through hobby drama and, you know, there's that. But anyway, it's a fun movie to rewatch.
Absolutely. It was peak 90s disaster era.
Yeah.
With this and Independence Day coming out in the same year. And then Armageddon and Deep Impact coming out in the same year.
It's because we were just all so happy in the 90s that they had to create scenarios where the world ended.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you rather the world to get destroyed by an asteroid, twisters, or aliens?
Well, to be fair, it was just the one, and it didn't really seem to hit a whole lot of anything. I mean, it did go through the town, but it wasn't like... I was nerdily trying to show Shane some actual F5 damage, and he was like, okay. No, he humored me. But, anyway, all I'm saying is, we didn't see the whole town.
Well, and also a special shout out to Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
Love Bill Paxton. Rest in peace, Bill Paxton.
I found out Helen Hunt is not Holly Hunter.
They're two different people.
I was really confused when she started talking and didn't have a lisp. I was like...
Didn't talk out of the side of her mouth either. And also
she didn't have the right color hair. It just wasn't her at all.
It just wasn't her. So, my 2 recommendations. So, one is the new HBO documentary, which will be coming out around this time, which is Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allows. And I just watched it this morning as of recording this, and it's a really interesting look at a man who, in public, was such a poster child for, like... Masculinity and women love Rock Hudson. And then behind closed doors, men loved Rock Hudson. And Rock Hudson loved them back. And it's a really interesting and... There's a lot of emotion in this documentary, too, because it had a lot of people really talking about their connections with him and his battle with AIDS, and the fact that, like, he was best friends with Nancy Reagan, which is why Ronald Reagan started taking it seriously when Rock Hudson died. So, there you go. But there was also some really hilarious moments, because some of the men who had flings with him had some really funny comments about being with Rock Hudson. I laughed. I got emotional. It's an HBO documentary, so you know it's quality.
Yeah, they're pretty deft at making them.
Mm-hmm. And then my other recommendation is The Transformers, the movie, which is the most 80s thing I think I've watched.
Just a non-stop soundtrack. Someone's mixtape.
It was, and all of it was made for the movie. All those songs were made for the movie.
Really? Because I was just BSing you when I told you Weird Al made that song special for the movie. I was very confident when I said it, and he believed me, and it turned out to be true.
The song Dare to Be Stupid by Weird Al Yankovic. The Touch by, like, Sam Bush or something like that.
It's such a weird...
It's so 80s hair metal and, like, 80s type synth music in this, but the animation is very anime influenced. There's really cool action sequences. There's some real stakes in this movie, because, like, the infamous death of Optimus Prime happens in this film, and they killed off all the main Autobots to introduce a whole new fleet of new characters, and even to the point where they just basically had Unicron turn Megatron into a different Galvatron.
Megatron, but make
him look different, and then give him Leonard Nimoy's voice instead. And Orson Welles, which this was his last film as Unicron. The voice acting is really impressive. There's a ridiculous cast here. It's an exciting hour and 24 minutes, because that's all it is.
Yeah, I mean,
it comes at you.
It was just kind of the music killed me at some point. It's like, why is Dare to Be Stupid playing?
You Dare to Be Stupid?
They're flying around fighting each other.
Yes, and it's a fight scene.
Are they stupid? Is that the
Dare to Be Stupid?
I did really like Hot Rod's whole aesthetic. That's whenever I was playing, like, Need for Speed on the PlayStation, I would paint my Mazda Miata in colors like that.
And then you have Judd Nelson voicing him, who was so hot in the 80s because of Breakfast Club.
Oh, yeah.
And basically was supposed to take on the Transformers as their new cool young leader.
Rodimus Prime. Okay.
Rodimus Prime.
Right. Sure. Why not?
My favorite is Optimus Primal, who is the gorilla of the Maximals in Rise of the Beasts. And then the derpy as hell Dinobots.
Yeah, why is they talk like this? Why use
Grimlock talk like this?
Why use lot word when few word do trick?
Yeah,
they just do. Like punch stuff. It's like, we're attacking this, and they're like, okay.
Like, I go ram head.
Grimlock love punch.
Grimlock love ram head into Unicron.
And they start fighting with each other for no reason. It's pretty good. I mean, it's dumb, but it's pretty good.
So, a lot there to process. Hopefully you'll go see Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. You could check out The Craving on YouTube, and we have some recommendations for you as well. But Jess, thank you so much for coming on yet another episode of Welcome to the Wasteland.
You're welcome. I breathe this into the universe, so.
And Jess is going to be on the next episode for the Indian Post.
Boy, am I.
Yes. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.